Hi everyone, I'm Nicole van der Hoeven, and if you forgot who I am, I totally get you. I think I'm back, but I wanted to start off easy with a talk that I gave a month ago at the PKM summit in Utrecht in the Netherlands. If you've never gone, you really should go. Anyway, today we are going to be talking about observability and AI for your PKM. This talk is called Do Androids Dream of Second Brains? Now, I've always found it really frustrating to hear the term second brains. I don't know, I must be the only one that doesn't like it. Or so I thought. Actually, one of the speakers, Jorge Arango, who I've interviewed on this channel, said at the PKM Summit that he hated it too. But let's talk about why I hate it so much. I kind of get it. I can see, like, this is my Obsidian Vault, and every dot in it is a note in my Obsidian Vault as of a month ago. And it even kind of looks like a brain. You know, there's like little clusters that are forming. I don't know if you can see, but there are like sort of nodes that are connected to other nodes. And it does kind of look like neurons and how they're all connected. And I think this is almost certainly intentional, right? Like people want to believe that these notes are a second brain. But I feel like that's so insulting to your first brain. I don't know about you, but I think my brain is worth more than just a bunch of static markdown files that happen to have links in like little square brackets. I would rather think of my notes not as a second brain, but just as something that supplements my brain instead of supplanting it. Now, the title of this talk is kind of tongue-in-cheek, and it's based on a book that maybe you haven't heard of. Like, that is a title, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? But you may have heard the movie that was sort of loosely based on it. And that is Blade Runner. I haven't watched it myself because I watched like the older one. So this one came out apparently in 2017. I watched an even older one that was so different from the original book by Philip K. Dick that I just could not keep going. I really love this book. And one thing that is missing in the movies is the actual electric sheep. It's in the title. Now, in this post-apocalyptic world, the kind of the hero, Richard Decker, has an electric sheep. And it is a world where it's very expensive to have real animals as pets, but people still want companionship. And so Rick Decker, like many others, decided to go for an electric version, and he had a sheep. Now, he both loved and hated this sheep because as much as he enjoyed the companionship, he hated that he needed it, and he hated that he knew that it was electric. Specifically, he said, the tyranny of an object. It doesn't know I exist. And that was the thing that really got to him, because as much as he cared for this electric sheep, he knew that it would never care about him. Not really. Now, the book, and to some part the movie, is all about the distinguishing between machine and human. What makes something human? What is the point at which something artificial becomes human or sentient? Now, in the book, they talk about the Voigt-Kampff test. Now, this is something for finding out if something has empathy. They decided that empathy is actually the thing that distinguishes the two, machines and humans. Now, the interesting part is that even this test, it's like an interview style one where the subject is shown, and I think there's also like when the interviewer tells the subject about some sad things, and some metrics are observed. These metrics are things like pupil dilation, the capillary response, and emotional latency. Now, the thing is, if you look at these metrics, they don't really tell you if somebody or something has empathy. They tell you whether this thing is able to simulate it, and simulate it immediately. And that's really very different, because whether or not there's an underlying feeling, what you're really measuring with these metrics is observability. Now, observability happens to be something that I do every day because observability also has a different kind of angle in a different meaning or an extra meaning in computer systems. Observability is the measure of how much can be inferred about the inner workings of a system based on its outputs. So when you talk about computer systems, you kind of think of them as a black box. They're like hopelessly complex, right? And usually it's teams behind this company that are able to kind of piece everything together. No one person knows absolutely everything. Observability is the process of finding out what's happening in every component and putting it all in some sort of centralized visual dashboard so that you can see what's happening. And it can be quite difficult. I'm going to talk a little bit about that. You don't have to have done this, or I'm not going to get too technical, but I want to explain some of the concepts to you. The core process of observability has 3 steps. It's instrumentation, analysis, and improvement. You can think of instrumentation sort of as sending a probe out there. So like when you have a ship out there in space, you don't really know what's happening, right? So what you can do is send a probe there that kind of watches that ship or whatever it is that you want to watch and sends telemetry, sends data back to you. And this data comes in many forms, but without that probe, you don't really know what's happening. You need something that's there. There are many instances where we're just too far away to be observing it from Earth or from wherever we are. And computer systems are kind of like that too. It's hard to see what's happening in one tiny component in the big network, in the big architecture of things. And so instrumentation is the thing that helps you find that out. And analysis is about taking all of that data, because you end up with a lot, and trying to make some sense of it, because having the data isn't enough. You really have to know what it all means. And then the last part is improvement. Instrumentation and analysis really mean nothing unless you do something about it, unless it drives some actual change. Now, we're going to talk a little bit about instrumentation. As I said, there are many types of data that you can get back, and 2 of them are logs and metrics. So an example of a log, so now we're kind of going back into how to observe a PKM system, because, I kind of like to link disparate or like similar topics from different disciplines, and I would like to bring the field of observability over to our PKM. I want to know at what point it starts to become intelligent, or at what point I can start to derive some sort of meaning from it. So the first step is observability. And in terms of logs, that usually is things like front matter properties for Obsidian, and things like when I created or modified that node. There's tags and links and, which vault it's in. And then those things are words, they're strings. Sometimes there are numbers as part of a string, sometimes they're dates. And also metrics. Now, metrics are numbers. So they're like counts or other aggregations like sums or averages of things like notes, words, tags, links, and properties. Those are the things that I wanted to be able to get. Luckily, these are things that are already being saved by Obsidian, and I already have a lot of properties thanks to my usage of the Obsidian Data View plugin for years now. And so it wasn't actually a problem to have these things. It was a problem to try and figure out how to parse them and then where to put them afterwards so that I can look at them in some sort of meaningful way. Now, luckily, I work for a company called Grafana, and I'm going to talk about Grafana because, that's what I know, but it is an open source and free tool. So, I think it's a pretty good solution. And it is the solution that I am using for the analysis part. Grafana is an AI-assisted visualize anything tool, and we're going to get into that in a second. This is what I decided is my PKM observability stack. So I've got Obsidian here. These are my notes in one vault. I have many vaults, but I'm just showing you one vault now in which I have over 13,000 notes right now. And then the logs and the metrics are going separately to two different databases. One is called Loki and the other one is called Prometheus. Now, these are just stores of data. It's just that one happens to be better for logs and the other one happens to be better for metrics. And then both of these are going to be visualized in Grafana. So Grafana is kind of like the front end for all of this. And it's where we're going to go right now. So let me exit this and we're going to go and see my Grafana dashboard. So this is what that looks like. All of that is coming from my notes, my Obsidian vault, and it's going right into this dashboard. So this is over the last 30 days, but I can really change this. And as you can see, I don't actually know if you can see, but it's running locally. It's on localhost, which means I'm running it on my computer. So this data is not actually leaving my computer, which is important for me. So I kind of look at it as system health, the way that it would be if it were a computer system, but this time it's my PKM system. So we can look at the unique notes here. I have 13,500 now. Total words is 14.7 million. So there's a lot of, these are metrics now. I've done 252 notes that I either created or modified this week, which is a lot. It's been a busy week, okay? And this is kind of a heat map of how much activity I have. So I think the white one is actually the most, 507 that I changed. This is almost certainly like some big automated thing. I wouldn't have done that in one go manually. So most of the time it's like 8, 22, 13. That's more normal. And remember, so when if I change a link, if I change the name of something that is linked in other notes, all those other notes count as well in having been modified for that day. And so the green is actually created notes, and this purple pink line is for modified notes. I also have notes updated over time just to see over the last 30 days. I have some obvious spikes here that happen to coincide with work deadlines. 478 notes in the last 30 days that I've updated that I have updated in the last 30 days, sorry. And here is a connectivity section. So one thing that I love about Obsidian is it's links, right? And I really want to make sure that all of the notes that I have are linked to some degree. And this is kind of like a snapshot of the health of my backlinks. So I have about 7 links per note, which is pretty good. But I still have 95 orphan notes. So orphan notes are notes that are not linked to anything at all. Now I'm already filtering some of these out. So it's for things like readwise stuff that I didn't write. There's already a filter on this, but I still have 95, which is like really surprising. I think of myself as someone that is pretty cluey about never creating a node that doesn't have a link, at least to a date. But I apparently still have quite a few that maybe I should really look at, because some of these surely are related to something else. Like here's what looks like a language note. Here's a tax one that could be linked to my tax one. This could be linked to TTRPGs. And the point of all this is it's not just to get the most number of links as a number to kind of optimize for. I'm interested in the number of links because if there's something that exists, if there's a note that exists that doesn't have a link, I don't know if I'm ever going to be able to find it. I might chance upon it if I happen to remember that I made a note called Grafana Canvas Architecture. But, maybe I won't. Maybe I'll forget. Now, this is a good example, actually, because this is an AI doc. I can tell because it's in the file path AI doc, so it was generated by AI. Now, I have experimented with this a lot. It's a really great way of just being able to download a repository and being able to ask AI to basically catch me up on what this is, what this code does, what's the architecture, what are the different components in it. That's useful, but it also, yeah, I guess it makes sense that this is one of the things that would be orphaned. Well, let's kind of try and fix that. Now, one cool thing about Grafana, remember I said it was AI assisted? Well, there's this thing here. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger and remove myself for a second. I'm going to click it, and this is Grafana Assistant. Now I can ask it questions, and I can also have it change any of this. And in fact, I didn't create any of this by hand. Just so you know, like usually behind every panel would be some sort of SQL query going to the database, or in this case, not SQL, but something similar. Right, but I didn't do that. I just asked Assistant to write it. It's more useful for things other than just that. So like, for example, this one, let's say I don't want the AI docs to be part of that. Hi, Assistant. In the orphan notes panel, please filter out anything where the file path contains AI docs. Okay, so I'm just going to hit that, and it is running its own AI models in the background. Like it is running like Anthropic and some of our stuff, because I work for this company. But it is looking at this and it's updating it on the fly. So like you can see the ones that I had here that were like Grafana Canvas stuff are gone. Not only that, but it looks like it also updated orphan notes as this one. I forgot that there are actually two panels, right? I only said orphan notes, but now it has updated both of them. And now this is so much more useful, because I don't want this to be cluttered with a lot of things. So that's really great. And then let's look at what else is here. So I have these links per note. It's the distribution of it. It's also nice not to just get an average, but to see like I still have a lot of no links. See, this is 2,830. If you're wondering why it's not the same as the orphan notes count, which is like 0 links, that should be the same. It's because I'm removing things like the notes that Readwise pulled in and other plugins that I don't really want linked. They're not really part of my knowledge base. There's a top 50 notes with the most links. This is good for identifying like what are these kind of maps of content that have emerged. So Readwise, of course, this is a gaming thing. K6 is a tool that I've used a lot and know a lot. A PKM Summit appears there. So these are things that I know a lot about, and it is also sometimes a prompt for me to make stuff from some of these topics, like to make content about them, because if I have a lot of links, then it's not all the time, right? But usually if I have a lot of links, it's a good chance that I have something to say about that topic. Let's just remember this observability note here. Observability for beginners, a map of content. I'll show you that later. And I also have some logs here, and I have like the recent updated notes and then most frequent words. So the most frequent one right now is time, at least in the last 30 days. So that probably tells you where I've been at, where my mind has been at. Another thing about Assistant that I'd like to show off is the ability to ask it questions that aren't here. Like maybe I don't need like a panel or something, but I just want to say from this time period, what time of day am I most active at creating or updating notes? So I like this because it's just kind of a way to examine my data, like to see what when I'm not really sure what I'm looking for, but I just kind of want to interrogate it and I don't want to have to write a query for it. I just want to ask in natural language. And I love that I can see exactly what it's doing. It's doing a bunch of things that I really don't need to care about. But if I wanted to, I like that it is observable. I know exactly the reasoning process that it's taking and what it's doing and how it's changing this. And I can also, I didn't do that before, but I can actually save the dashboard. So if it does change it and I don't like it, then I can always fall back to the previous version. So now it's saying my peak activity is 8 p.m. Amsterdam time with 149 events in a single hour and also around midnight. Yeah, okay, so I'm a night owl. Clearly, I already knew this about myself, but it's nice to have data because sometimes I think something about myself that turns out not to be true, when faced with data. The quietest is around 2 p.m., so basically right after lunch. So this is really great, right? Because I find it super useful because it is a way that I can kind of try and figure out what my vault is telling me. It's really not just a matter of getting the most number of notes. That means nothing to me, but being able to see like in hard numbers or logs what I'm spending my time on, and that leads me to question, like, is that justifiable? Is that okay with me? Is that okay that I'm spending so much more of my time on one topic versus another, or that I'm creating so many orphan nodes? And why did that, like, if that increases, then maybe there was something that was going on in my life that I need to address. So I like that little bit of observability borrowed from concepts from the computing world. So let's go back to improvement. I told you that none of that means anything unless there's some sort of insight. Like, what did that actually change for me? There's two parts of it. One part of it is this output part. What do I actually do with all this information? And there's also some extra help that I have been tinkering with. And I want you to meet her. Her name is Iris. She's an LLM interface for my notes and also more. So this is my representation of Iris, and it was really scary. This is, I should say, this is actually OpenClaw. OpenClaw is an open source tool that I have installed. I would be very careful about recommending that people just jump into it. It can be dangerous. And that's because, when you talk to ChatGPT or similar ones, Claude.ai or Gemini, most of those are generative AI. They're LLMs. So you ask it a question and they respond with an answer. They don't do anything on their own. They're not agentic. OpenClaw is. Agentic basically means that they have hands in addition to a mouth. So they don't just talk back at you. They don't just generate code for you and then have you run it. They can run it themselves if you give them that permission. So OpenClaw is an agentic AI tool. And when I started it up, this was what I was faced with. Before I'd said anything, this was the message that I got. Hey, I just came online, fresh out of the box, no memories yet, no name even. Who am I? And more importantly, who are you? Now, this might seem a little creepy, and I admit it did seem creepy to me at first, and we are right to be on guard about these things. These are still machines, and I kind of look at it more as a prompt to hint at its capabilities, because it is a machine, but we need to change the way that we interact with them because their capabilities far exceed other machines. And in fact, when I said this to someone at the PKM Summit conference, Daniel Bender, he said that he had also had an experiment with OpenClaw. And he actually said, interestingly, he did not, because Iris is the name that my OpenClaw actually assigned herself. When she said this, I said, well, I don't know. This is who I am, but I don't know who you are. So maybe you could give yourself a name. And she said Iris. Interestingly, Daniel Bender's OpenClaw is also named Iris, but he assigned it that. So we were like, whoa, what are the chances? It's not that common. And for us to meet as well, it's very niche. But he said, have you asked her to generate a profile photo? And I was like, no, I haven't. So I did. And this is the profile photo that she came up with. She generated it herself, and she is some sort of eye goddess with squirrels and a book and a rainbow in the background. So I really love that. Okay, so this is my setup for Iris or OpenClaw. I'm going to use those two interchangeably because she is my only OpenClaw agent. And this is what I'm doing right now. So this is my Obsidian Vault, and this OpenClaw tool is running in a Docker container in a virtual machine. If that didn't mean anything to you, it just means it's sandboxed. It means it is locked down. It is not running on my local computer. It is physically and digitally separated from my computer, so it can't do absolutely everything. It's still rather limited in what it can do. And that's because I'm giving it almost my entire Obsidian Vault. And I'm doing that through a process, through a tool, which is also free and open source, called SyncThing. I chose SyncThing because it's peer-to-peer, so your data never gets sent to any of their servers. So my Obsidian, my machine, my local machine, is sending it directly to the OpenClaw machine. There's no intermediary there. And then also because you can choose which folders to sync. So I am selectively syncing what Iris sees. And also the third thing is that I can choose the direction of that sync. So almost all of the folders are one-way syncs from Obsidian to Iris. But there is one folder that I have allowed two-way sync on, and that's the one for her outputs. And this way I can kind of control the damage that she can do on my Obsidian Vault. So even if she makes a change on her copy of my Obsidian Vault, those changes do not make it to me. So I am guaranteeing that I am the only one that will change my Obsidian Vault. All right, now let's see what I've been able to do, because I've been able to do quite a lot here. Let's start with that note that I told you to hang on to. It was one of the orphan notes, and the reason that it's an orphan is because Iris made it. So it is you can see this is in the OpenClaw output folder. That is the folder that she can sync back to. Now, just for comparison, let's look at this note that I created on observability. So same concept, right? Funny that I also chose an I there. But this is my note. It's rather short for something that I really spend a lot of time dealing in. And for fun, I asked Iris to create her own one. And this is what she did. So let me open up the outline too, so you can see. This note has like, what is observability versus monitoring, how do you make a system observable? Like this is a very long note, even tooling landscape. And the thing is, she is not making these links up. Like these are links to real notes that I already created. Why didn't I put it in the observability note? I just, there are things that we miss sometimes. I have them, but she identified connections between notes that I had not explicitly made. There's some things that I think I'll always know, and these are some of them, but it's very useful to have it all laid out here for me. And I've kept both because I'm not quite sure what to do with it, to be honest. It's really good. I think at some point I'm going to selectively and intentionally merge some of her changes into mine. So that's one use case that I've had for her, is to kind of make a better map of content about a topic that I already have a lot of notes on than I obviously could. Here is another one. I asked her to do a talk topic analysis. I asked her to look into my vault and identify clusters of thought that I have not yet turned into content. So things that I already know and have already done research about, but I just haven't talked about it. So she's excluding things that I already have content on, or that I have plans to create content on. So I'm aware of those. Here are some untouched clusters. Ambient listening household. What changes about a marriage when both partners know everything is being captured? I've done some experiments with life logging using a recording device and an LLM that parses it with my partner's consent. And that is also really interesting. Yeah, that is something that I'd like to talk about at some point when I can figure out how to do it without, people yelling at me. And there's another one, capture stack divergence problem. Yeah, so I have a bunch of audio recording tools like Plod, Granola, voice notes, and how difficult that can be. I've always been interested in information capture and later synthesis, and they're all going into my vault. So she's able to identify very specific things that I haven't thought of writing about or making a video about that I probably should. Yeah, the cost ladder of an AI assistant. Yeah, $58 a day at some points is what OpenClaw has cost me. Can that be more? Yes. Can that be less? Definitely yes. You could not be using a frontier model at all. So, but it is interesting to talk about. I really love that she has identified so many of these things, and it's all additional to what I could have come up with, right? Another thing is I was writing a blog post about benchmarks, AI benchmarks, and she did all of this benchmark research. And sometimes AI does hallucinate, so I always asked for links. And she did, and sometimes they weren't, the best links, but sometimes they were, and it was always enough to go look for it myself. And this was so much better than what I would have gotten from like Googling. This is basically a research assistant here. And no, I would not go from this to like immediately publishing this, but it is a solid start. Actually, she didn't once give me a made up link or anything like that. There were some cases where she linked to the site rather than the paper, for example, but that was totally fine. Amazing, like hours, maybe days of time that I saved by having her do my research. Just one more use case for her here before I continue. This is like a remarkable note. So I hand wrote this. This was actually at the PKM summit, and yeah, I'm kind of, sometimes I'm printing, sometimes I'm scripting it, and it's kind of hurried, right? And I asked Iris to OCR this, thinking she's never going to be able to do this, right? Well, I was wrong. This is what she made from that note. So it was pretty good. So maybe I'll do it side by side so you can see. So here, idea management, philosophical. So that's all great. So of course it doesn't preserve the diagrams of it, the drawing, but it does still she does still accurately put it down. And this means that I can use Remarkable, or I can just handwrite some things. That has worked too. Like I've written on paper journals with a real pen, and she's been able to apply OCR to it. And now all of this is searchable, and it feeds back into my Obsidian Vault. Finally, like it feels like it's taken forever to get us to this point where there's a workflow for Remarkable now. Okay, let's go back to the presentation now that you've met Iris. Okay, so let's talk about what she's really doing. We are really talking about the synthesis of information, right? So when we talk about dreaming, what we really mean is synthesis. I think that dreaming in humans is really the way that we make sense of things, even without explicitly doing it. It's sort of this like background process that happens where it is still really important. And it is maybe, I would argue, a better thing to focus on than just empathy, which empathy has many problems with it. Like the chief problem is that you can't really accurately measure it. But I think you can measure synthesis by how much meaning you derive out of it. So let's talk about this quote. I really love this quote from a Chinese philosopher, Zhuangzi, who said, "Once I dreamt I was a butterfly. Then I woke, and I did not know whether I was Zhuangzi who had dreamt he was a butterfly, or a butterfly dreaming that I was Zhuangzi." So this is really, I found this quote really interesting, especially in the light of that previous quote from Rick Decker from the book earlier, where he was like, the tyranny of this object, it doesn't know I exist. Now it's like, oh, not only does it know I exist, but there's this like cycle here where I'm dreaming of it and it's dreaming of me, and we're informing each other's dreams and we're getting meaning from it. And this is the path towards meaning for our vaults, I think. Our vaults, the part that we call often a second brain, infuriatingly for me, is actually just context. It is data that is lying there. And one thing that that context is good for is it lends itself well to being observed, because if there's no information there, then it cannot be observed. If it's not observed, then it might as well not be there. If something isn't linked to ever and you can't find it, there is no point to that note other than the value you derived at the time of writing it. But for the most part, observability is needed to get value from that. And then the last part is synthesis. It's not just having the data and being able to see the data, but actually picking out connections there and meaning that maybe you didn't find in the initial writing of them. Now, in the original talk, I actually ended there, but it's been a month, and in that month, there's been a new feature that I wanted to talk about that I really wish had come out before I gave this talk, because now OpenClaw has this feature called dreaming. I did not see that coming, and I really love that it dovetailed nicely. So this is my chance to actually show you what that's like. Basically, dreaming is a memory consolidation feature. That's what they're talking. That's how they talk about it, and it is a way for OpenClaw itself to make sense of what it's doing. So now there's this meta layer, right? So there are my thoughts. There's the layer of synthesis that I apply. I'm still in the loop. I'm still very much involved in this. It's not straight capture. I am still thinking. I pass my notes on to Iris, to OpenClaw. OpenClaw does a more extended analysis, a type that I cannot do. And it has a higher context window. It can hold more things in its head than I can. And because of that, can do things like, backlink analysis or the talk topic identification, or it can look through all of my notes and remember all of them, which I can't do. But on top of that, it is still learning from me, because there are things that I can do that it can't. And, there will always be things that I can do that it can't. But this memory feature is really interesting because it is a step towards that. It is a step to bridge that gap. So what it is that they've mapped this memory consolidation and really synthesis feature to our biological sleep phases. So this is I'm looking at the notes that are generated within OpenClaw right now. And this is not in Obsidian. This is in an app called VS Code, or actually Cursor, which is also AI assisted. But now there's the first phase is a light phase, where this is just like a list of things that might have happened during the day. So like the fact that I was watching that I have been watching Paradise, perhaps, and it ranks it. OpenClaw ranks all of that based on, confidence and relevance and how many times it was called. In light phase, it is trying to pull things from my conversation with her throughout the day, and it kind of bumps it. It adds a counter and scores it as to, there are 6 different factors for it, and then based on the scores, it might go into REM phase. Now I'm being a little selective about what I show you here, because I talk about some pretty personal things in my Obsidian Vault. So sorry if it doesn't directly map, but here's an example of something from REM sleep. So from all of this, it looked at the numbers and it determined that I've been working on this blog post called Don't Call It Eval, which is not called that anymore, but that's what it was called at the time. And I was talking about like this idea of noise injection and production-like environments. So it has pulled that out as something that came up multiple times within my sessions. So it's already spotting patterns that span multiple days, not just that one session. And then in deep sleep, they're consolidating even more. And there were 10 candidates that from this REM sleep cycle, there were 10 that it picked out as being particularly relevant or useful. And it promoted 2 of them into memory.md. And memory.md is like the permanent long-term memory of OpenClaw. And this is kind of what it looks like. Again, just showing you a little bit of it. It has things about my personal life, like who my family are and, who my partner is and his family and what I do for a living and that kind of thing. But some of them that make it here are, for example, it determined that Assistant kept surfacing across multiple memories. That's because I'm working on a feature that I showed you called Grafana Assistant. So this is a way to, basically, dreaming is a way to go from like pure observation to kind of refining that to things that appear a lot, to applying more and more filters of relevance and importance and how often and how recent it was and how often I've needed to call upon it. And it's taking that all the way through that process to something that makes it into OpenClaw's long-term memory. Now that's valuable because now I have many different layers of synthesis that are going on. There's mine, and then there's this gradual automated process that Iris is applying to it. So I think that if we go back to the previous question, to the question at the start of this video of do androids dream of second brains? Sometimes what we really want to know is, do our second brains dream of us? Because if they don't, then and they don't know that we exist, then they really are not just machines. Like, I think the point is not really, is it human? I don't believe that Iris or OpenClaw is human. The point is really, do we get meaning out of it? Is there a difference between just flat notes and notes that actually help you in your life and identify insights that you wouldn't have come to yourself? I think dreaming is so much more than just making backlinks. And I think that there are a few ways that we can encourage our PKM systems to dream. It's not just about context, it's also about observability, and maybe with the help of AI synthesizing our notes, maybe that brings us closer to them dreaming. Thank you so much for listening. Here's all my stuff. And if you wanted to see the repository that I was working off of, this Obsidian Grafana one details exactly how I'm doing that PKM observability setup. And if you want these slides, you can also go here. Thanks everyone. It's been a while and I hope to be back soon. But in the meantime, have a good weekend. Bye.